Well, hello everyone. It's good to see you today. I'm so excited about what we're going to be talking about today, and that is brain pouting. And it's a book. And the author of the book is Pastor Devon Blanton. And Devon's here with us. Hey, Devon, how are you doing today?
Doing great.
We are so excited to finally get to talk about this. I have gotten so many emails from so many people that have said, are you going to get to finish the interview that we started on the radio the other day? And I said, I promise we're going to get to do it, because I am eager to hear everything about the book, how it came about. And so I've made me some questions. I've got some things I want to talk to you about. But first of all, will you just give us a little background? Tell us who you are. I think I find out something new about you every day.
Oh, yeah. I'm still, I don't doubt
What are
that.
you going to be when you grow up? Can you tell us?
One day, if that ever happens, I don't know. But I've been a pastor for quite a few years. I started pastoring in 1975, and I've been a counselor. Not too long after that, I started professional counseling, and I have dealt with mostly women in the practice, and that's typical anyway, because
Right.
guys don't want to talk, so the girls can talk, but the guys don't often, but we do get them in there sometime. But my history is, of course, I have a musical background, and of course I still play music and all that. But my academic training is, my postdoctoral studies is in psychiatric studies, and I'm certified in family and marriage and grief counseling, also in drug abuse. So
Wow.
those are the areas.
Well, we're going to get into all of that here in just a minute, but will you tell us a little bit about your music background? Now, did you play in a group before? Tell me about what you did musically.
Well, yeah, in the early 70s, I was part of a team, the Blanton brothers. I have one brother, not as good looking as I am, but anyway,
Of course.
I'm sure he won't. I hope he doesn't see this interview.
I know.
But he's great. He's amazing talent, and we have a history of music in our family. Sonic Flood. My nephew was the drummer there. He was
Wow.
the lead singer in By the Tree, and Hobie Lister's my cousin. So
Hovey Lister's your cousin. That's pretty cool right there.
my
I
grandfather.
know a lot of people in gospel music that would love to be able to say that.
Oh, I
He
know
was
that.
well loved.
Yeah, he was a great guy. He was a great guy. My grandfather and he were best friends as well. But I after I started pastoring, the music again kind of slowed down some. I couldn't travel as much, and did a lot of traveling with Travelers Quartet. You remember those guys?
Yes, I do.
So
That
awesome.
is so cool.
Yeah, and I played with a lot of players all around the country, all around the world, and I really enjoyed that ministry.
That is awesome. Yeah, that's another interview for another day. I could talk to you about that forever.
Sure.
But today we're going to be talking about this book, Brain Pouting, and what a beautiful book. Where did you get this picture here on the front?
Well, there's lots of sources on the internet that you can get and I got it legally. So
I love it.
Thank you.
It's so cool. And it just kind of, you can pick it up and look at this picture and you kind of know what the book is about. And I think that's great. It draws an interest to the person that sees the book to want to know more about it. And when I saw brain pouting, my first question was brain pouting. Where did that come from?
Well, it's when the brain doesn't get its way. It kind of pouts a 3-year-old,
Pitches a fit, in other words.
It's a fit, it's not happy about what's going on, and as adults we have a hard time interpreting what it's trying to say, and ultimately it ends up being what we call depression. So that's my term. I coined that phrase, and it just is the way I see the brain operating when things don't go the way it wants.
Exactly, which makes a whole lot of sense to me. I've never heard it put that way, but it does. It makes a whole lot of sense. So probably there are a lot of people that are calling what they're going through depression when it may not even really be depression.
Well, there are different levels of depression. Certainly, beginning stages are sometimes sleep disruption, It can be you're antisocial. You don't
Uh-huh.
want to be with people.
Don't want to talk to anybody, want to be by yourself and
You,
kind of
you get
disengage
comfortable.
from your
So,
spouse
yeah,
or
exactly.
whatever. See, I've been reading the book. I mean, I know you would think that this blonde, wasn't real because, they say that we're not very smart, but I actually have never really loved to read. And that's the truth. I would pick up a book and flip through and look at the pictures but I just never would sit still long enough to read. But when I picked up your book, I could not put it down. And when I spoke with Tina that works for your office there, and she started telling me just a few things about you, I was intrigued enough that she sent me my own copy. And so anyway, I have been reading about the different levels of depression, and we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. Recently, I had a close friend that committed suicide and wrote a note, and he had basically convinced himself that the world was a better place without him in it, and that with him being here, he was just putting a burden on all of his friends. And he wrote a letter and he told everybody his heart and how he felt. And that happened about 3 days before I got your book. And when I got to that level of suicide, I read that part and I was like, that's what his letter said. And so I know that there's a real need for people to find out this information. And that's the purpose of me interviewing you. I love gospel music. I love being a gospel music DJ. I love singing gospel music. I love music by Hovey Lister, your cousin. Yeah. But listen, there is so many things that are important, and through the avenue of gospel music, we can get the word out to people. And a lot of times people think, because I know Jesus, then I don't need to talk about this, because if I do, it kind of makes him look bad, that this is a problem and he didn't take care of this one for me. So there has to be a reason or something that inspired you to write the book. What inspired you to write this book?
Well, I have had a counseling practice for quite a few years, and I see a lot of people who are depressed, and stories are remarkably similar, even though there are different levels and maybe different triggers, but the end result's the same. And I really wanted to give something that's practical, so everybody could understand it. It's why it's subtitled "A Layman's Guide to Understanding Depression." So I wanted to get it at a level where everybody could read it, get it, and understand how to talk to people who are depressed. That's one of the biggest issues, because depressed people shut you out, especially severe the depression, the less they want to talk to you.
Exactly. Well, tell me, is there something personal? Have you ever experienced depression? Have you had this in your life? Is that kind of what sparked the interest for helping people?
For sure, yeah. When I was 27 years old, just a few years ago, we wanted to have kids, and we'd been married almost 15 years without having kids. And I was blue about it, because I'm a natural born daddy, and it just ate at me, and I was so distraught about it that I went into a real severe depression.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes depression can be caused by medicines. For example, you take antihistamines a lot, it'll change your personality, and it can easily cause you to be depressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then you live a life of depression because you have allergies. You don't realize they're connected.
Exactly.
And that's one of the things that I was doing. I was taking antihistamines, not realizing that I really was having an allergic reaction to them. And it depressed me so severely. And you tie that in with the other triggers of life, the failures, the difficulties,
right?
The desire I had to have children so desperately. And
right.
After so many years, you get tired of people asking, well, why don't you have kids? When you have kids, that's a constant prayer.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like that was the first question that they thought of every time they saw you. And that was the one thing that was going to trigger you having the thoughts, about feeling like something was wrong or whatever. I know in women, there a lot of times there will be different medicines, not just antihistamines, but there's different medicines that sometimes are prescribed to women that will change their entire personality.
Exactly.
And you're like, I've said to friends before, have you changed something? Because something's not right. You're not acting normal, you know, or you get mad about things you wouldn't normally get mad, or upset or cry about things. So we have to be very careful about what we put into our bodies. And I think that's very important, not just in depression, but in anything. We have to be careful that what we are putting into our body is something that's actually needed and not something that's more harmful than is needed. What are some of the symptoms of depression? Say there's somebody that's maybe listening today and they are wondering if a spouse or a loved one or a friend is and they've had it in the back of their mind. Maybe they're depressed, or, you know, something traumatic has happened in their life. What are some symptoms to let them know, hey, it could be depression?
Well, sleep loss, difficulty sleeping, that's not always the thing that triggers, but sleep deprivation can cause depression. So if you're sleeping poorly, that's a sign that you're in depression. Again, that can also be a sign of other issues as well, but wanting to cocoon, be alone, prefer to be in your own mind. People's comments irritate you, even though they're just trying to be people or just trying to be nice or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Road rage can be a symptom of depression. We have a lot of depressed people in the world today, apparently.
Right, absolutely. I
Also,
have read Facebook statuses before of people
yep,
and read what they said, and I've thought, they're depressed.
yeah,
Just from what they said, because it sounds like someone that's battling that, and then later find out, well, they lost a parent, or they went through a divorce, or they had this major life thing happen in life, and it threw them that direction. And I didn't know it when I read the status, but sometimes just by reading it, you can tell, hey, that person's really battling something. If somebody bought the book or purchased it, I know they can get it off of Amazon or whatever, but if someone said, hey, I purchased your book, what would your, if there's any lesson that they could get out of this book, what lesson would you want them to walk away with? Because there's a lot of lessons in here, but what's
yep.
the main one that you would want them to walk away with?
I guess the final thing is that nothing is static. Things never stay the same. That if you have experienced depression, even if it's been for years, it doesn't necessarily have to stay that way. That there is hope. Some of the symptoms are crying jags or appetite changes. Sometimes you want to eat all the time, and sometimes you don't want to eat at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I believe that they need to get out of the book mostly is that there is hope, that there are things that can help you. And I had a friend who is a pastor, a dear friend, very conservative-minded pastor. He always thought that depression was caused because somebody was in sin. You know, they were sinners.
Yeah.
And I challenged him on that. We're close, and I was able to challenge him on that. And it's not like you can, read 2 scriptures and call me in the morning.
Right.
Depression is very real. It's not simply. It doesn't just only have a spiritual connection to it. That can be a part of it. That's why I counsel in emotional levels and spiritual levels and even physical levels. I want to make sure the human body is physically where it ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I also include finances too, because if your finances are a wreck, you're going to be a wreck. So
Right. I think there's a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people that probably struggle with talking about the depression because they feel like that something's wrong with them because they're facing that. And if they would realize that, hey, there are some things wrong, but like you said, there's hope and there's some things we can do and we can try. that would help so much. And so I want to encourage everybody that's listening today that if you are affected by depression or someone in your family, just because your mama had it or your daddy had it or your sister had it, I always say you don't have to accept the family curse, and that you need to get help for yourself and be responsible for what you're going through yourself. But it doesn't necessarily mean just because this one battled it that you're going to. So a lot of times we put those things on ourselves because we get it up in our head that this is the way it's going to be, and only God knows the way that it's going to be. He's the one that ultimately knows the outcome and everything. I'm kind of like you. I have a lot of hats that I wear, and I do a lot of things, not as like fancy as what you are, you know, like psychologist and all these things. But in my own kind of way, I do wear a lot of hats. And one of the things that I do is speak at ladies' conferences. And I was just thinking last night, I thought, you know, this would be a great book for an event. Like if there was a ladies' conference and this was the workbook for the day, and this is what was taught all day, and each lady took this home, that would make a big impact on their lives. I would give anything if someone had told me about your book way before they did. And I don't even know how we met. I think we became Facebook friends, and maybe you watched one of our shows or something. I think that was how we met. But I was thinking about this last night. Boy, I can think of a ladies' conference in Ohio that I speak at that those ladies would absolutely love this book. Now, this is a great book, and lots of information in it and things to help us. And I know there's a lot of people that are going to want to get it. Can you tell us how they can get the book?
Yeah, you can go to Amazon.com and just type in my name, Devon Blanton, Devon, not I-N, it's O-N.
O-N. You had to be different.
Yeah, Blanton.
Or your mama did.
Yeah.
Your mama had to be different.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that a lot of people will do that. Now, this isn't the only book that you've published. You've published some other books, right?
Right.
And when they get to Amazon, they'll see a list of all the other books.
Right. Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
You want to share a little bit from the book on one section and just tell us, pick an excerpt and.
Well, there are lots of areas, but I want to talk about grief a little bit, because a lot of people are dealing with grief, and grief not only is about loss, but it is also about, you know, like losing a companion or something. The grief can be the experience of losing things, like not succeeding in life, or having a goal that you always hope to have to reach, then you end up not reaching that, and it can be the sensation of grief. But when you lose somebody, and I've counseled quite a few folks that have lost loved ones, and a lot of times counselors try to talk them out of grieving. Of course, grieving is a very natural thing, and we need to grieve. We need to be able to close doors and all of that. But grief is a reminder. This comes from the book. Grief is a reminder that we will never forget. So it has a sweetness to it. And if you understand what its purpose is, and that it enables us to be able to heal, we won't get locked into that one thing and stay there forever. I knew a lady that probably still to this day is grieving over the loss of her husband after many, many years. And she was afraid that she would forget him. And so she redoes that grieving over and over.
Yes.
She has the comfort of knowing she'll never forget him.
I go through those things. My dad passed in 2011, and I'm a daddy's girl. And always I would crawl underneath the car and work. He'd work on the car, and my brother would be gone with his friends, and he would want somebody to hold the flashlight. And I would crawl under there, and I'd get that flashlight just right, shining up on the car. And my dad would teach me all kinds of things about life, and he didn't even know that he was. And in 2011, when he passed, he was the glue that held our family together.
Right.
And I grieved, but I also got to a place where I didn't want to be around people. And I experienced depression. There were times when I wanted everything dark in the house. I didn't want anybody to walk in the room. I didn't want any light in. And I remember one time that I was laying in the bed and everything was dark. And I'm an emotional eater. So I eat to be happy. I eat when I'm sad. I eat to celebrate, and I always was laying there in the bed. And I remember laying there thinking, you got to get up, because if you don't get up, you're buried here for life. You've got to get up and move. And I remember thinking, but I physically don't feel like getting up. I just want to lay here. And I always would study, I have always loved the Lord, and I've always been able to open up my Bible and let him speak to me. And there's been times when I could just take it and just go, whoop, and wherever I opened it was exactly what I needed to hear that day. But I didn't even have the desire. I didn't want to read. I didn't want to study. I didn't want to know what God said. I was just so down in the mully grubs. And I remember one night I was laying there and I thought, boy, I really need some help. And I didn't want to go and talk to anybody, because I felt like, well, the whole town and everybody will know I'm struggling, so I kept it all to myself. But I did talk to somebody. I talked to the real big, great counselor, and I just began to pray and cry. And I believe I probably cried for 5 or 6 hours. I didn't sleep that night. I cried and just cried. And I felt like that the Lord just held me, and he just said, it's okay. I'm your dad, I'm your father, and it's okay. You've got to grieve. And until I went through that grieving process and I realized that I was grieving, I couldn't get past it. Now, there's still days like my dad's birthday or Father's Day or Christmas that it seems like he should still be sitting there, but it's a totally different thing. I don't want to be away from people. I want to be with everybody now. And that's the difference. And that's part of this layman's guide to understanding depression. That's part of what I've already gotten out of here, that some of the things that I've been through were perfectly normal. And you have to kind of go through those things. Will you explain what the levels of depression are?
Well, they're not always the same for everybody, but there's the denial, anger, and you try to deal with it. You're making concessions and all of those things. And it's important that you progress through each one of these appropriately. But they're not, those are just kind of a rough, crude method of determining where people are. But everybody's an individual. So I want to assert that all that I do is based on Scripture, based on the power of Jesus.
Yes.
Based on what he says, and I would never assert that psychology or any of that. In fact, I don't really use that term very often. I'm a Christian counselor by nature, and so I believe that God uses things. He understands how we're made since he made us. He knows that we're not just spiritual, and that the church has typically just treated us from that alone, but we're also emotional. So we have to pay attention to the other part of who we are.
Right.
And that we're also, physical. Yeah, for example, if you have trouble sleeping at night, and you come into my office and you're saying you can't get along with Jack, and the first thing I would do is find out how you are physically. What's going on with you. I'd be asking you questions like, what your periods are like, how your sleep pattern,
Right.
and all of those kinds of things to determine are you a diabetic, are you anemic. Those are very common. People don't realize that they deal with, and it affects them emotionally, and consequently it affects them spiritually,
Right.
and obviously relationally as well.
So I figure we probably have some women right now listening and thinking, how would I get an appointment to go into his office and talk to him? Because I really need to do that. And, it might have just been today, could have been a divine appointment for them to just happen upon this interview, and they may really need somebody to talk to. How do they do that? Is there a website with that information, or?
Well, they would contact my executive assistant. She handles all my calendar, everything that I do. Basically, I don't. In fact, when I get up in the morning, she tells me what I have to do for the day.
Absolutely.
She's
I've talked with her, and she is a go-getter. You are very blessed.
Yeah,
and I will post that information also for on the video, because I want people to be able to get in touch with you, because I believe there are a lot of people and there's a great need. And I want to be talking to you about some more about your other books too. But right now, I just think this book is so timely, because there are so many people right now that are facing this, and they're ashamed that they're facing it, and they don't realize that there is someone that they can talk to. They don't realize, a lot of times they think, well, they won't understand, but you're not just anybody. You're somebody that went through it yourself. So,
absolutely.
That was the whole foundation for this book was, I've been through this and I want to help people. How old were you when you wrote your first book? How long have you been writing?
Well, I've been writing even since I was a kid, but to have an official book completed, I guess probably 30s, I suppose.
In your 30s?
Yeah, late 20s, early 30s. But the books that are on Amazon now have been written recently, and they have, I believe, extraordinary depth. One of the books that kind of coincides with this conversation is Holes in the Soul. And it's an in-depth book that explains why we think the way we do. So if you live with somebody and they have a certain thinking process and you want to know why that is, that book is for you. And,
it's for me too. It's my next one I'm going to read. I'm always talking about divine appointments. I worked for a dentist for 28 years, and one day a young boy came in to get his tooth work done, and the dentist was asking me about our singings over the weekend, and I was saying, oh, we were in Georgia, and they were singing us to death, and there were people getting saved, and people getting healed, and the altars were full. It didn't matter what we were singing. And that young boy looked at me that day, Pastor Devon, and he said, ma'am, he said, I want what you got. And I said, what you talking about? And he said, I want what you got in your heart. He said, I brushed my teeth to come to the dentist today. I had no idea, but when y'all started talking about Jesus, I realized that I didn't know him. And I told that young boy that day, after I prayed with him and he got saved, I said, you know what, today was your divine appointment. And I've told my husband, and I've told my Paula that works for me. I have told so many people it was a divine appointment for me to meet Devon. And I'm so thankful that I got to do that, because, it's crazy. It's amazing, just the connection of the books and the messages. And I'm sure that out of all the women that are in this world, that I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one that really could use the message in that next book that we're going to be talking about, because we're going to that one next. But anyway, I hope that a lot of people will be blessed, and I know that you do too, with this brain pouting. When you feel like, hey, there's something wrong with me, you'll realize by reading the book that no, this is a very normal thing, and just need to get a hold of what all it is. And I hope also that some people will reach out to you and come and see you, talk to you.
Well, sure. They can friend me on Facebook. I still have maybe about 50 slots left.
50?
Yeah, I've got
not many.
So
you got 50 people, and then you have to turn them away. Then you'll have to do a what's it called, like a fan page.
Yeah.
And then that way you'll be a public figure, and they won't be able. You won't have to tell them no, because there's going to be a lot of people. I'll get with Tina and I'll post the information for your office number. One other thing, we've got about 1 minute left. Will you tell us about your church, where you pastor, where it is, the name of it, and all that kind of stuff?
It's RTP Community Church. That's where my office is, and it's in Durham, North Carolina. got to be the sweetest people I've ever pastored in all these years. Just remarkable and amazing, godly church. And even through all this COVID stuff, we're still worshiping Jesus and having a great time. Getting ready to start home prayer meetings. We're calling them bonfires. And bonfire home prayer meeting. That's what it is. And we're
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's great.
That sounds amazing. Like that would be something right up my alley. You know, I wish I wasn't so far away. I would love to come. I would love to. I know I would probably fit in. Now, what kind of music do y'all sing?
Well, we do mostly contemporary Christian music, but we do it's just a variety, really.
Well, now, when you talk like me, you can't sing contemporary music because, you know, I've got that country girl hick, you know. So I love God Walks the Dark Hills. And a friend of mine said, well, what's the difference in Southern gospel and contemporary anyway? I said, well, when you sing God Walks the Dark Hills, it's like, God walks the dark hills. And I said, but if you sing it contemporary, you would sing God walks the dark hills. But it's still the same words. It's still great music and a great message. But I love contemporary music too. I just am not one that could ever sing it. But anyway, thank you so much for sharing with us today. This has been a great interview. I have enjoyed it so much. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Amen. Thank you, Vonda.
Thank you, Devon.